some people are, I tell people instead of automating your test cases in your test case repository, automate your defects. Because how many of you in here work in a place where you have a test case repository and you can honestly tell me that all those test cases are up to date? Because most of them I look at they're garbage. They're not valid anymore. I can't automate off them because they tell me, click this and it should do this. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. But, because if I automate my defects, and how many of you are familiar with the 80-20 rule? What the 80-20 rule is in software, and it's, I don't think, but 20% of your defects are actually causing 80% of your rework. So if I'm automating my defects, there's a good chance that I'm going to cut down on that 80%. Smoke test. I tell everybody, as you map out your product, and you create all these page objects, I just smoke test. Simply, you have to go through the page objects, open up, make sure they open up, and do some basic, if you create a user or something, that's your basic thing that your application does, create that. But make sure after in a CI environment that after you do a build, that at least all your screens actually open up. You don't have, oh, I'm getting a 404 on all these pages. So why did you even give it to somebody to test it? Assert phases. And this is what I was showing you earlier was, we use like DB unit, we have a set base, stabilized base of data. And when we run the CI environment, we build the environment, then DB unit places all the data in there for us. And then we'll run through on each individual user at different levels, and we'll look at the page and scores or any other data that's on there. We'll make sure all that data is still there, and all the buttons, if there should be disabled, visible, not whatever, we'll make sure all that's there, so that we don't actually have to manually go through it. So they're going, are these buttons here? Is this text here? We know that's already there when we run these phases through after a new release. And this one on repetitive, this is a Sakuli thing, because Sakuli is image-based. If you got EULAs, about pages, help pages, whatever, we just take snapshots of that. Sakuli goes through, driven by a WebDriver, looks at the page and says, yep, that's the right help material that's on there, that's the right EULA. We never touch that manually anymore. And then the other one which I do is code coverage. I can use, especially with Selenium, I can use this code coverage code called J-code, which works with Sonar. I can actually run, as I run all of my test cases, J-code, which sits out on the web server, will on the fly will determine what classes and stuff I'm going into my test cases, and then when I come to Sonar, it'll give me my test code coverage, and then actually let me go individually drill down to each of the lines of code, and it'll tell me which ones have actually been covered. So when you see, so if I've got an area where I'm going, oh, I've only got like 15% coverage, and I'm not really sure what this is, I sit down with the developer, and I go, what does this code actually do? And help me figure out what test cases I can write off of this.
That's a tool called Sonar?
Sonar is a quality code metrics tool, which is basically built as a bunch of plugins that do a bunch of work for it. Okay. J-code is one of the plugins that does code coverage for Selenium on it.
And it compares the application code base to the functional tests?
Yeah, just like if you did JUnit with like Coverture or something, it does the exact same thing.
Cool.
J-C-O-C-O.
And so those two work together to do that?
Yep.
Sonar and...
Yep.
What does automate acceptance criteria mean? What do you mean by that?
I literally mean, and because I believe more in a behavior-driven development, and I don't know how many of you are really familiar with behavior-driven development. In behavior-driven development, your acceptance criteria would be almost written out as an English-like sentence saying, when I do this, then this should happen, and then this should happen. And those are actually test cases. I can take those and go, oh, okay, that applies to my WebDriver code here. And then that's what I'm writing an acceptance case for. Let's see. And this is the thing which I was going to tell you what I was saying. I cannot believe when I go into organizations how many of them have bought an automation test tool that's either, say, something like JUnit type testing tool or something, I've got a quality assurance staff that has no technical skills. And they can't figure out why that testing tool never makes it. You really need to go, when you're going to look at automation tools, determine who's going to be using them. Who's going to actually be using and doing automation for you? What are their actual skills? Another thing which they don't do, because of open source and because of the concept of plugins, they never talk to configuration or development to find out what tools they're using. So an example, you might have development configuration managers who are using Jenkins, Maven, all these tools, and you go buy QTP, which doesn't work with those. Why would you do that? Okay. So here's tips and tricks, and this is from pain in my past. Especially if you're using a JUnit structure on your test cases, encapsulate your test cases. And what I mean by that is each test case should start and stop in the same place. Why that's important is because if you have a test case with multiple tests in it, JUnit won't run those in the correct order all the time. So if you're counting on one test to end, leave you at a certain place and continue to the next one, bad news for you. It may skip that test, and your test starts to go and goes, I don't see any of these elements on the page.
So are you using the same browser to run multiple tests that navigate?
Not sure what exactly you're asking.
Okay, so you're not spinning up a new browser for every test?
No, because we're running test suite, so that started at the beginning of our test suite.
And you're expecting each test case to start and stop in the same location?
A simple way to think of it, I've got a welcome page.
Right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
My question is, though, if one of those tests failed to navigate, then wouldn't the test after that fail to execute?
No, because it's going to start by going to the home page.
Okay. So re-navigating to the
Yep.
home page. Okay.
That way it's not dependent on a previous test.
Right.
Again, don't write dependent tests. Bug your developers to use IDs and names on elements. It'll make your life so much easier. If you're going to use XPath, you're going to be miserable. Use the resource bundle to do data-driven testing. Do not hard-code data in your method. Use implicit weights and not explicit weights. And this is a big one we do. We add our own debugging to it. And what happens is as our test cases are running, and we're running them from STS or Eclipse, I'm watching that test case in the console, and I'm seeing it enter each page, and I'm seeing it enter each element, leave each element, enter the element, leave each element, leave the page. So if it fails, I actually know exactly where it truly failed at. That's one thing you can run into is if you've got thousands of test cases and something fails, you may not know exactly where that test case truly failed at. Especially the way Selenium WebDriver goes, because you may have failed on one page when you were going to another page, and it failed because it told you, I can't find this element on this next page. Well, you actually failed before that. So I see that.
Are those custom logging statements
Yeah.
that you're using? Okay.
And this is some of the stuff we do. We integrate with Sakuli, JDBC, and Puppeteer. I've already told you basically about Sakuli. It's image-based. JDBC, I'm sure everybody has it. Puppeteer is for our UI developers that do JavaScript unit testing. Basically what it's doing is WebDriver is driving you to these pages, and then the Puppeteer test runs against that page. And so running in a CI development, again, we're using Nexus, if you don't know, is basically a plugin, basically a plugin repository. It's basically for Maven. So it holds all your plugins, your jar files, and then makes them available. Instead of, if you don't use Nexus, and say all of you are using Maven, well, each of you is going to have a Maven repository on your machine. Well, why would you want to do that when you could just set your config file to point towards Nexus and pull it out so you don't have to do that every single time. They're all available on Nexus, and you can manage them from Nexus. So it makes all the stuff available to Maven. Jenkins kicks off the build and communicates with Maven. Pulls our code from SVN, and then because we run, out of Jenkins, we run Selenium Grid. Jenkins communicates with our slaves that we say via slaves for IE, Chrome, Firefox, whatever, and runs all of our test cases in parallel at that point for us. Next one.
Sorry, what's SVN?
So,
Version.
yeah.
Subversion.
separate machines.
Yeah.
Oh, on separate machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna run the, strapline test?
Can I ask you a question about, I always want to say secretly.
Seculi?
Yeah, what are your thoughts about using it for something like game testing? So it's not
That's
just.
one of the things they use it for.
Really?
Yep.
So like actual,
Yep. If you go to the Seculi site, you'll be amazed at what they use it for. And
Not-
there's
not-
actual demos of them using it.
not just UI elements for the
Yep.
game, but actual, like.
Anything you can, Seculi can handle any single thing you can actually see.
Huh.
I had a quick question, I think you already went over it, but if you could maybe just touch on it one more time, how you're making your page objects available to your test pages? Are they being inherited on the test
Yeah.
page?
Yep. And I chose a couple tests specifically because I'm gonna, first test in almost all WebDriver. Second one, which I'll point out to you, is actually using Seculi in it. So that's WebDriver logging in. WebDriver is going to navigate to me. It's going to take me to the strategy plan here. And then in a minute here, it's going to click the start strat plan for me. And now this is Seculi. As you saw the mouse move, that's all Seculi taken over right there. Again, they're integrated, so inside my test case, I can run WebDriver and Seculi methods in them.
So what are the gotchas with Seculi and game testing? Anything I should be aware of before I,
I
Dive
don't
in.
do game testing, so I don't.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you on that one.
okay.
So do you, I mean, I guess their APIs would support one another. Can you
Yeah.
pass a driver into Seculi and
Yep.
it, yeah?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things I want to put, another reason, as being somebody in the quality assurance field, why would you want to know about Selenium? Take a look at the job trends versus something like QTP. You can see where the industry's going.
Job trends, what's that?
This is basically all by year total number of job openings for either QTP or Selenium that are listed.
Yeah,
That they-
asking for skills in Selenium versus skills in Qt.
Yep.
Did you create a plugin to QC or anything, or no, for defect?
We use one of the things I'm sort of going to tomorrow's presentation. We use Sonar. One of the things in Sonar connects directly to Jira, so I can create defects from Sonar into Jira. And then one of the things I'll give you, if you ever want to truly learn more in more detail about all the stuff I'm showing in open source stuff, it's the Phoenix Area Selenium Users Group. It's free to join. All you have to do is go to meetup.com. And we have monthly meetings covering all things open source. And generally, if you go there, we're very good at giving you a lot of the code that we actually use. So, and some of these gentlemen here, you'll see in here, we're at our last one. We actually will do workshops where we'll actually walk you through getting started. So it's free to join. I highly suggest that if you really want to learn about this stuff, that you probably want to join the group.
Where do you guys meet at?
Right now, we meet at Able Engineering, which is over on 32nd Street in Southern.
It's not that far of a drive.
Yeah.
Just going to here.
Any questions?
You go back to that last slide.
Yeah.
So when we run a Selenium script and when we have it running on Sonara, so the defects we can create in the computer.
Yeah.
without having to-
Yeah, well, one of the things you can do with Sonar, because Sonar will give you violations and uses things like find bugs that can create your violations. You dig down to the actual line of code. By right-clicking that code, I can create a Jira defect from that, and I'll put the code in. And the other good thing is it hooks into Eclipse, so a developer can actually we can set up a review in Sonar. They can actually pull that code directly into Eclipse, fix it, and then Sonar will run again. Next time Sonar runs, we'll mark it as fixed for you.
When we run the code from time to time on the application, if we have an issue on the application, then task, the defects will get reported in Selenium.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Actually pulled up Sonar here, Tom. I know you're going to cover this
Yeah.
tomorrow, but just a preview of what you're going to cover. Here's what
And,
Sonar looks
yeah,
like.
can you actually go to home? And open up ETW. And baselined in, which I'll show you tomorrow if you show class, it's dumped into HAR files, all of our baselines for all of our performance testing for us.
So just your straight Selenium interface.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
But, and that's,
On how many virtuals?
that's 4 virtuals.
Okay.
And that's roughly, I think we're around 1,500 test cases.
You guys run that per virtual?
Yeah, because it's running in parallel, so it's running all 1,500.
You guys just run CI, use integration all of them?
Yeah.
Stupid. You have to run it on a workstation?
We can, yeah.
Nice.
Google.
Are you running on a server or
Server.
workstation? Okay.
Yeah, when we run on the server, if we want to actually monitor it, we can just do a VNC session to it and watch it run.
So you typically run it like in a batch mode when you want to fire it off, is what you're talking about?
We run, what we basically do is our CI as code's checked in, we'll run our smoke test suite. Then at midnight, we run everything.
How often do you run your smoke test? On every check-in?
Every check-in.
On every,
And the smoke test takes 5 to 10 minutes.
so your smoke test is part of your developer?
It's basically that it is acceptable code to us.
They accept the criteria of saying, okay,
And we're not guaranteed that everything works on the pages, but we're at least guaranteeing the pages that can show up.
And how long is your smoke test run?
About 5 to 10 minutes.
But your functional test suite is completely separate from the development your check-in.
Yeah, when we're ready for release, we have a separate basically sandbox. It's automation only we run against. That way we don't have anybody in there doing